Hi everyone, Miss Caitlin here, and welcome to the 4th week of Crafty Kids. This is the younger artist session for artists in grades pre-K through 5. So unfortunately, this might be the last Crafty Kids session for a while, or at least the last regularly scheduled Crafty Kids session for a while, just because I am done at the library on Friday and I'm returning to school very soon. So I won't have the materials to send kids home with you. But I am going to try to continue with videos here and there so that you guys can keep up with Crafty Kids while I'm not here. So for today's session, I thought we could make some art that's inspired by Jackson Pollock. Jackson Pollock was a painter during the 1940s and the 1950s, and he was what we call an action painter, which means he didn't really use a paintbrush to paint, or he did, he kind of just splattered the paint on, or he dumped it right out of the bucket of paint. We also refer to Jackson Pollock as an abstract expressionist. That means that he didn't paint representationally, meaning his paintings didn't really look like anything, but you could still kind of tell what emotions he was feeling when he painted it. There's really not a right or wrong way to action paint, so I'm going to show you a couple materials to use for your action painting. So here I have a string, some yarn that I can use, a plastic spoon. Now this spoon is not for eating. I'm not going to eat with it after I paint with it. I'm going to wash it and reuse it for paint, or I'm going to throw it away. I also have a paintbrush, and I'm not going to paint with it. I'm going to kind of splatter with it. And I have a toothbrush. Now again, this is not a toothbrush that I use to brush my teeth with. This is going to be a special painting toothbrush, so if I have an old toothbrush at my house that I'm planning on throwing away, I can use that to paint with now. So ask your parents about that before you gather your materials, alright? In this week's kit, you'll find a piece of white cardstock paper, the infamous egg carton full of paint, a big paintbrush, a little paintbrush, a plastic spoon, and a couple pieces of yarn. Now, you're not limited to the materials that I'm giving you, and I actually want you to go ahead and use other materials if you're able to. Just make sure you ask your parents or guardians before you do. Before we get started, it's very important that we cover ourselves up because we don't want to get paint on our nice clothes. So you could use an apron or a smock if you have one, or an old shirt, or even a trash bag. If you cut it up the sides or cut a hole in the bottom of it, you can wear it as a homemade smock. Whatever you decide to do, just make sure you cover up those nice clothes that you're wearing, because the last thing you want to do is get paint all over your nice clothes. Now that I have smocked up, I think I'm ready to begin. So I'm going to start with my string. And I'm going to dunk it in some of my red paint because red makes me feel hungry, and I'm very hungry right now. All I'm thinking about is lunch. So here we go. I'm going to dunk it in. I'm going to use the bottom of my spoon, so not the scoop part, but the handle, and I'm going to use that to kind of dunk my yarn further into the paint. So I really want to lather it up and get a whole bunch of paint on my yarn. Then I'm going to bring it over to my paper, and I'm just going to lay it down and drag it. I'm going to pretend it's a worm or a snake, and it's slithering all over my paper. It's leaving its tracks everywhere it goes. Look at that. I'm going to get a little bit more paint on my yarn. This time, I'm really dunking it in there, just coating it in paint. Using my spoon to help me with that so I don't get my fingers all icky. But hey, if you're feeling brave enough to do that, stick your finger in there and push that yarn down. Alright, here we go. We're loaded up with paint. We're going to drag our little snake friend across the paper. Look at him go. So now I'm going to grab my big paintbrush and I'm going to dunk it in yellow because yellow is a happy color and I'm pretty happy. So now I'm going to also grab my small paintbrush, and I'm going to use it to tap my big paintbrush to splatter the paint all over my paper. You can also splatter by using an old toothbrush. So if I dip my toothbrush into the paint and then I use my finger like this on the bristles to just kind of flick it. Here, I'll show you up close what I mean. So I'm going to take my finger and I'm going to run it across the bristles just like that. You can do that same movement with your finger on your paintbrush if you wanted to, if you just flick the bristles or the hair on your paintbrush. It's a little messy, but it's effective, it works. Another technique to try is stamping with your toothbrush. So you just kind of place it on your paper and pick it back up again, just like a stamp. Now I'm going to show you how you can scoop the paint with your spoon and pour it right onto your paper. Now you might get a couple big globs this way, but that's okay. If you like them, keep them. If not, I'll show you how to fix that. One way to get rid of those big blobs is by getting a clean piece of yarn and just dragging it through all the wet paint on your paper. And it kind of spreads out what you already have down there and fills in some of that blank space, especially around those corners. I tend to get more paint in the middle of my paper, so now's a really good time for me to fill in those blank spaces on the edges of my paper. Now I'm ready to paint in true Jackson Pollock fashion, and that is by dumping the little buckets of paint that I have on my paper. And you see, I'm not just pouring it out right, I am kind of drizzling it. So think of it like, you have chocolate syrup or something, and you don't want to just smother, well maybe you do want to smother your ice cream in chocolate syrup, but usually you just kind of want to get that nice drizzle. I have most of my colors on here except for white, and I think it's safe to use my white paint on my white paper now. So I'm just going to continue with my splatter methods and see what happens. I haven't really used my small paintbrush yet, so I'm going to try to incorporate him in some way. Let's see what we can do with my small paintbrush. Get some white on him. Use my finger to splatter. Oh, it's working pretty good. I don't know how well you can see it, but it looks pretty good from here. The last thing that I'm going to do is another quick pass with my yarn, because the yarn really helps to spread it out. And I'm going to get some white on here, and I'm just gonna drag my little snake friend here through all the paint and spread it out all over my paper. If you're finding that the first color that you used is covered up by the other colors, just do another quick pass over it with a yarn or another tool and add it back in there. Don't be afraid to overlap your colors, don't be afraid to mix your colors, and don't be afraid to make a mess. Because, as artists, we make messes, we make mistakes, but most importantly, we make art. And I think I'm done. And you know what? Honestly, I can't really tell the difference between mine and Pollock's. Okay, maybe there's some subtle differences. So I fibbed. We're not quite done yet. We need to clean up. We need to wash out our tools. We need to throw away any trash that we have. And we need to wipe off the surface that we painted on. That about wraps it up for this session of Crafty Kids. I'm not really sure if I'll be able to continue with these videos or not while I'm at school, but if I can't, I hope you continue to create, because you're all very talented and you deserve to do it. So it doesn't matter if it's something you make at school or just at home for fun. I want to see what you're working on. So you could drop a picture in the Crafty Kids group on Facebook or send it in a message. It'll find me eventually. So continue to use those talents and continue to create, and don't be afraid to share your work with me. That's about it for now, so until next time, I'll see you later.